Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the official home of power mining analysis. An exciting episode for you today. We're joined by Matt Prusak, the president, and Asher Genoot, the chairman of ABTC, or American Bitcoin Corp. This is Matt's first time on the program. We're going to be talking all about strategy, outlook, and growth trajectory of this company. A lot to talk about. Before we get into it though, take a second, smash the like button, guys. Big help to myself and the channel. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join and let us know in the comment section below if you're currently holding shares of ABTC and how you feel about this company moving forward. With that being said, let's get into today's video. Okay guys, that's right. An exciting episode today, welcoming the team from ABTC to the channel for the first time. We've got Matt Prusak, the president, Asher Genoot. We all know you as the CEO of HODL, also the executive chairman of ABTC. We're really looking forward to this one. A long list of questions, really talking strategy, growth, outlook for the remainder of 2025 and beyond. Matt, this is your first time joining us on the channel. Do you mind giving us a quick introduction on yourself and how you got involved in Bitcoin and then ultimately ABTC?
Absolutely. So, hi everybody. I'm Matt Prusak here, president of American Bitcoin. Going back, I built companies at the intersection of energy, infrastructure, and technology for years. Right, I was building a very large rapid response COVID laboratory company before joining forces with Asher about 4.5 years ago to start building large scale Bitcoin mining infrastructure. So, I was the chief commercial officer at US Bitcoin Corp, and then over to HODL, where I was also chief commercial officer. Stepped into the turnaround CEO job for Ionic Digital, which was the Celsius a subsidiary in mining, and then I'm now back with Asher at American Bitcoin.
Yeah, we got a lot of stories on all of those chapters. So
Yeah.
at another time we can dive into
the short version. It's great to be here.
Now, we've been fortunate to cover Asher and the team at HODL many times on the podcast, and always get a great insight into what's going on. But this is sort of like the first time we're talking about American Bitcoin now. But can you give us some sort of understanding of where the idea, the concept came from?
Yeah, so at HODL, we really had two businesses that we're building, right? And you see this a lot in our sector with, I think people coined the term of like crypto AI pivot, et cetera. But ultimately, you have an infrastructure business and then you have a Bitcoin business. And in order to be successful in an infrastructure company, you need to drive your cost of capital down, which means you want to drive your volatility down. For a Bitcoin business, Michael Saylor, for example, has been very successful in selling his volatility into the stock and getting 0% convertible notes. And so driving your volatility down actually hurts you in getting that cheap convertible note paper as well, right? And so I think that's the first is you have like two structurally different businesses that you're optimizing for that drive different results. The second is you have a different type of shareholder base. When Co2 invested into the company last year, we had more and more institutions come into the business saying, we want you guys to invest in infrastructure, in data centers for AI. We don't want you to invest in Bitcoin. There were two choices we could have made. One was, all right, let's just go into data centers and let's kind of forego Bitcoin. But the second, which is what we did, was we spent a long time perfecting and building some of the largest facilities in the world for Bitcoin mining. And we believe in Bitcoin. We believe in what it stands for. And so we said, you know what? Why don't we rethink the structure of the business and allow us to continue expanding on a sector that we've become market leaders in? Meanwhile, also taking advantage of the opportunity in developing data centers. And so we spent a lot of time last year thinking about how do we actually separate these businesses. Actually, in Co2's convertible note, we had in those, if you guys look at the public filings, that we would have the ability to carve out the Bitcoin business because this idea we've already been working on. And then American Bitcoin was formed earlier this year. And so I think the catalyst was obviously getting super close with Eric and Donald Trump Jr., understanding kind of their belief and passion for crypto and Bitcoin specifically, and then ultimately forming an American Bitcoin. But the idea behind the company is very simple. We want to be a pure play Bitcoin accumulator. And what that means is we're not just a mining company. We're not just a treasury company. Our main focus is providing dividend to the shareholders via increasing their Bitcoin per share. And we have multiple mechanisms in order to do so, because I think the reason why people invested in mining businesses or treasury companies was to get levered exposure to the underlying asset. And for a variety of reasons, which I'm happy to go into on this call, I don't think that that's really panned out for those ecosystems. And so we really rethought, what does a shareholder want? And how do we take a first principles approach to building the company that shareholders want? And how do we think about different ways in achieving that end result, which is increasing Bitcoin per share for the ultimate shareholder?
Now, before I let Bryce go down the vision and strategy route, I just want to go back to that point when you decided on this idea of American Bitcoin, but then sort of looking at how you were going to facilitate going forward and using Gryphon Mining as the vehicle to take this. How did those how did those conversations? Because we've had Steve and Sim from Gryphon Mining on the podcast previously. Obviously, we didn't have any idea what was going on from their position there. They were talking about this growth in hash rate. I didn't quite see it growing myself, but obviously with the likes of this takeover, can you talk through the choice of Gryphon Mining and actually what did that mean for Gryphon Mining shareholders and for American Bitcoin as well?
So there were a couple of key kind of pivotal moments in getting to where we are today. I think the first was Hut 8 deciding we wanted to spin out the Bitcoin business so we can accelerate growth in Bitcoin and we can accelerate growth on the energy side. So we can have two companies at the leaders of those industries by separating out those capital pools. So that was the first big decision. But we realized, okay, we can build an amazing Bitcoin business and Bitcoin mining, treasury, but is there room for another public player in the space? Right? As you all know, having an amazing shareholder base is really important. Having liquidity in the stock is really important. And we said, all right, there's a lot of noise today in the market. There's a lot of Bitcoin miners that are public. There's a lot of treasury companies. At the time, obviously, there wasn't. And so what is our differentiated moat outside of just being great operators? Do we have a reason to build a great community of shareholders, a great community of audience base? And I think Eric and Don have had very loyal followers and supporters of theirs. And that's really bringing those two pieces together. And today, I mean, American Bitcoin embodies and stands for who they are, right? They're one of the most American families and at the same time, massive believers. And also, I think some of the biggest faces around Bitcoin today in cryptocurrencies today. And so that was the forming and the merger with an entity that they had to form in American Bitcoin. Then as we went public, access to a suite of financing. So if you look at what made MicroStrategy a sub $1 billion company into a $100 billion company, it was the ability to utilize convertible notes, the ATM, and now these various more complex financings to get there. And if you go public via an IPO, a direct listing, or a SPAC, you actually don't have access to an ATM for a year. And so Gryphon was very interesting because background is one of their largest shareholders, their largest actual shareholder was Anchorage Digital. And Anchorage is an OCC chartered bank. They actually just announced the USDT coin with Tether today. They're phenomenal exchange custody provider in the US. And we have a deep history with them. They're a lender of ours. They're supporters of ours and backers of ours. They actually converted their debt to equity at a premium to our stock last year, and people were very, very confused on why. Obviously, today they're very much in the money and happy on that decision. But I called them and I said, look, we would like to go public via an existing company to be able to have access to these different financings. We'd like a company in our sector so we can continue that continuity. Gryphon obviously hasn't operated well in kind of the history of the company. And I think with US Bitcoin merging into Hut 8, we've done a pretty good job of showing people turnaround stories. And so that was kind of the natural synergy. We had basically the largest shareholder of Gryphon who had seen us execute, had taken bet on us as a management team in the future, were willing to do so again here. And then we saw a company that had the right foundation for what we wanted from a public markets perspective, similar to Hut 8 for US Bitcoin Corp back in the day, but didn't have the execution on the operations of the actual mining business itself. And so obviously we came in, and within the first week of going public, we announced that we went from 10 to 25 exahash. So I think growing are much bigger step functions that people are used to as well.
Was there any potential benefits other than that, using that vehicle to enable you to use levers with Gryphon Money in terms of sites, in terms of potential, in terms of they had a small mining fleet, but I'm assuming that comes part of the American Bitcoin family now.
That's right. And that's that, like, look, there's a lot of these treasury companies that are taking over biotech companies and all these various businesses that have nothing to do with the core business. So having Gryphon kind of be a mining business and us being able to take value from that rather than having to kind of keep this weird business alive while we're kind of running our business, it allowed us to have continuity and be able to obviously build upon some of the assets that they had.
Yeah, good context there. Matt, maybe one for you. In terms of the current operations, Asher just made note to that rapid increase in hash rate. Obviously, you guys are increasing your fleet. You've got the Vega site itself. Can you talk to us about some of the assets within the company right now and also the position of the HUD-8 HODL? Was that included in the transaction? Did that go over to ABTC or where does that sit?
Sure, happy to address. So first and foremost, we're structured for growth, right? So as you can already see, 10 exahash day one, courtesy of the HUD-8 carve out. We've accelerated that to roughly 25 today in North America with a heavy concentration in Vega. Vega, by the way, is a crown jewel. I mean, you're talking about a site that is 5 football fields in length, multiple percentage of the overall Bitcoin network. There's really nothing like it. And we believe it to be maybe the largest single building Bitcoin mine in the world, right? So tremendous achievement by the HUD-8 team to develop that. In terms of where we go from here, the HUD-8 HODL. So where we go from here on the American Bitcoin side, we have the optionality. We've got a great partnership with HUD-8. We've got the firepower to build. We've got access to the capital markets, and we've got the know-how to deliver. And so it's really going to come down to, over the next few quarters, smart growth, right? So we are never really ones to just chase headlines. We do want to listen. Having a big exahash number is great, but at the end of the day, lemonade stand economics. It has to work. We need Bitcoin mines that actually make money. We are fiduciaries, and so we are always looking for opportunities to grow, but to grow responsibly. Now, in terms of the HUD-8 HODL, that stayed with HUD. So American Bitcoin geared towards pure play, geared towards accumulation, geared towards HODL. We're building our own war chest, and you'll see over the coming weeks and months, as we put out more disclosures, the routine conviction as we cost average into Bitcoin show that conviction, and we have zero intent to sell. That is over on the American Bitcoin side. The HUD-8 side, I defer to Asher about that. They built a fortress of a balance sheet in Bitcoin, but of course they are now an energy development superpower. So it's up to Asher what they want to do with that.
In the speed at which, American Bitcoin has grown is unbelievable and I believe unprecedented. And so let's kind of explain why, right? HUD-8 today is around 10,000 Bitcoin on the balance sheet. We've been around for over 8 years now, right? Since HUD-8 became a public company. American Bitcoin has been around for not even 8 months, and it already has 25 exahash online. It already has more than 25% of the Bitcoin that HUD-8 has, right? And so we announced that we're around 2,500 Bitcoin. That's our last publicly disclosed number. Obviously, that's continued to increase and grow. And so we really see American Bitcoin being one of the world's largest Bitcoin accumulators that shareholders can get access to and grow into. And I think there's something that's really unique. When we talk to institutions and adopters of Bitcoin, I explain how it's really fun being able to kind of work between HUD-8 and American Bitcoin because both companies hold Bitcoin on the balance sheet now. But they hold Bitcoin on the balance sheet for very, very different reasons. HUD-8 holds Bitcoin on the balance sheet as a treasury asset for our balance sheet to run our core business. American Bitcoin holds Bitcoin on the balance sheet to provide that exposure to its shareholders who want exposure to Bitcoin itself. And so the reason why those are different is because at American Bitcoin, our goal is to manage through the highs of the crypto cycle, the lows of the crypto cycle, and over time, continue to increase someone's exposure to underlying Bitcoin. And so if you own one Bitcoin or you own 1.1 Bitcoin through an ETF or custody directly, versus if you own 1 Bitcoin through American Bitcoin, over time we want to increase Bitcoin per share. So we're increasing your exposure to Bitcoin with these different active managed strategies of mining, treasury, and so forth. We will not put that Bitcoin at risk, right? We will not do different transactions to cap the upside of that Bitcoin. And so we're really focused on maintaining the sovereignty and the risk management of that Bitcoin so people know that their exposure is with them and they don't have kind of an FTX or Celsius situation. On the other hand, at Hut 8, Bitcoin is an asset on the balance sheet to run our business. And our CFO, Sean, who joined from Citibank, traditional banker for like 15 years in power utilities and renewables, when he joined, his question was always, when are we selling Bitcoin to invest in infrastructure? And today, it's great because he's a full believer. He's like, having Bitcoin on the balance sheet is one of the best treasury assets because we have an underlying asset that's appreciating. And at the same time, we're able to pull a credit revolver without any cost. And when we pull the capital, have really low interest and utilize the capital while the money's working on the background, right? And so at Hut 8, we'll write covered calls. We pulled over $30 million in writing covered calls because our thought is like, all right, if Bitcoin is close to 200,000 and we get covered, we just have a lot of cash on the balance sheet at that point. If not, we're making tens of millions of dollars in these premiums. And so you hold the same asset, but because you hold it for different reasons, how you monetize it and what the purpose it does on your balance sheet is different. And that's why I tell people Bitcoin is for everyone, even if your use cases are different. And we're a prime example of being able to show people that.
A couple of follow-up questions, Matt. That site at Vega, the Vega site there, that you talk about the five football pitch lengths there. When we look at sites of some of the peer miners, and they have far more buildings in one location, are there any financial benefits having one very, very big site? And secondly, probably more importantly, as you're discussing, Bitcoin HODL, the Bitcoin that you'll mine with American Bitcoin, is the intent there to use some of that to cover costs or to HODL as much as you can, knowing that the expectations will appreciate and give you obviously the Bitcoin you need for your treasury management system within American Bitcoin as well?
Let me first address that second point. That's really interesting, and then I can talk a bit about the building. Asher, we've done a lot of blueprinting in our in our careers, so we can talk about the reasons why we designed this with such intentionality. So, to the HODL, and using it to cover costs. We've never sold a Satoshi. Pretty cool. I think we launched April 1, day one. We had exahash firing coin right into the wallet and have continued ever since. So we are a HODL company. I would say we are, if not the only company on a Bitcoin standard, one of the few. Our revenue, we have top line. I mean, this is an operating business. It's in Bitcoin, right? Our treasury is in Bitcoin. Trying to figure out how to make sure I get paid in Bitcoin, and if I get paid, I frankly transfer a lot of it to Bitcoin. So we are trying to retain the Bitcoin, that's our scorecard, right? And Asher talked, Bitcoin per share, BPS, Satoshis per share too, obviously a fraction of a Bitcoin. That's our North Star, right? The strategy comes down to where to play and how to win. We've decided we're playing in accumulation. That means mining. That also means treasury strategy. That means ecosystem as well. But the North Star is Bitcoin accumulation. That's why we describe ourselves first and foremost as an accumulator, not just a miner, not just a treasury. Right. So when it comes time to HODL, we're all in on the HODL. Now to the building, it can speak to a bit. There is efficiency that comes with scale. The future of Bitcoin mining is going to be institutional facilities. Very American of us as American Bitcoin to measure things in football fields. But this is the way we are. I mean, this is what we do. We don't dream small dreams at American Bitcoin or at Hut 8. And this is something Asher's team is really fine tuned both on the power side and the ops side. So Asher, anything you want to add there?
Definitely. I think on the second to Matt's point, unlike a treasury, we don't have to buy Bitcoin at spot prices. We can buy them at a 50% discount to spot prices, and that's the best way to think about that in terms of a kind of cash perspective. And then on the building for Vega, not only do we believe in, we're confirming this with all the manufacturers, right? So I think it's pretty true that this is the single most Bitcoin produced in any building in the world, right? That was a mouthful. But what's also unique about this site is that it is direct liquid to chip cool technology. It's rack density. It's more dense than the most advanced Blackwell chips from NVIDIA in terms of power cooling and rack density per rack. And we built the whole thing for around $450,000 a megawatt. And I think that is the so what. We've always taken pride in building fast and building cheap and maintaining high quality. I think this is the best we've ever done so far because, I mean, you guys know this. There are people who build air facilities for this cost, if not higher. And we built this full infrastructure stack, liquid to chip cooled, new technology stack. We pushed Bitmain to develop this new server for us. And we did it at a cost that I don't think anyone can compete with.
Yeah.
Oh,
Pretty impressive. And we've seen the pictures of that. I remember as it was being built, how rapidly the building was going up. Now, Matt, you made reference to football being an American thing. Asher, earlier you mentioned the Trump family themselves have become seen as really quite a big part of the American fabric. You guys have another X factor here at ABTC, as in the fact that you have Eric and Donald Trump Jr. on the board. There's obviously benefits of having people like this associated with your company. Can you talk about some of the doors these kind of relationships have opened and how this helps differentiate you truly as the American Bitcoin Corp?
Sure. Let me, Asher, why don't I chime in and feel free to jump in as well. So we don't have Eric on the board. We've got Eric in management, which is even better. So his involvement in the company is active. We're talking daily, effectively, on a wide variety of topics, right? People ask, is this like a brand deal? No, this is not the George Foreman Grill. I mean, Eric is an involved member of the team of the company. He comes from a real estate background, right? And that, at the end of the day, a lot of what we do, especially coming from the HUD ethos, is effectively industrial scale development. So his involvement has been fantastic, as well as with Don Jr. They're effectively two incredible communicators, right? And we've seen now, with the American Bitcoin story getting out there, it's time for us to just break free of only the crypto crowd, right? There are millions and millions of everyday Americans who've heard about Bitcoin. Maybe are a little bit curious about the store of value. They've seen gold rising. They've heard Bitcoin is a digital gold, but they don't really understand how to get exposure, right? And so seeing familiar faces with a business background, providing some legitimacy to a company that, by the way, has the operational chops. I mean, that is the ideal combination. Now, you mentioned on the policy side, Eric does private citizens, so not involved politically. Carrying the water. Obviously, there's the old line that you may not be interested in the government, but the government is very interested in you. So at American Bitcoin, I have engaged often with policymakers. So much of our industry comes down to education, both of the everyday American, to Asher's point around what is an accumulator, what is a treasury, Bitcoin, what does that mean? Where's the literal mine? There's an education factor for the everyday American, but there's also a lot of education for the policymakers. And so there is a lot of time to be spent educating them, the same way that we've been working hard to educate institutional investors about the Bitcoin standard and what we can bring.
Hey, now one of our follow-up questions there in relation to the Trump effect was going to be how involved in the day-to-day operations are they? You mentioned the real estate background. We obviously think ABTC has high growth aspirations in terms of future growth, future sites or locations or real estate. What's kind of the trajectory there, Matt?
Sure, I can speak to a bit. A lot of it is the HUD 8 pipeline. So I need to give credit where credit is due over the HUD 8 side. So we find American energy very attractive. Few reasons. Ample electrons in key markets, the deepest and most liquid capital markets in the world, right? And stable legal jurisdictions, right? These are American law, American team, American energy, and ultimately American Bitcoin. So we're looking at a lot of sites here in the States. Whereabouts we want to go, it's going to be with the eye towards being a fiduciary, right? We are capital allocators. These are sites that are in the hundreds of millions of dollars in investment, and the numbers are scaling. We keep adding zeros and commas to these builds. So it's a really close sort of conversation we have with our energy partners and with HUD 8 as our sort of our primary in delivering these structural advantages.
We just announced 1.5 gigawatt capacity under development. HUD 8 manages a gigawatt today, so that brings us to 2.5. And then we have a multi-gigawatt development pipeline as well. We've got a lot of power. Our team's crushing it. They're doing an amazing, amazing job. And so I think we have ample power for American Bitcoin and its demand. Vega, for example, 15 exahash is about 200 megawatts to put into the scope of all of this going on. And so having thousands of megawatts to be able to support American Bitcoin and its ability to grow is really important. As Matt mentioned, unlike a mining company, we're not chasing these vanity metrics of, do we have the most amount of exahash? Do we have the most amount of Bitcoin on the balance sheet? We're chasing Bitcoin per share. We're chasing the return profile of every investment that we make. And we will go hard on investments when the time is right, and we will pull back and wait on the sidelines when the time isn't. And I think someone who's done it on a USD, the dollar denominated basis, is Warren Buffett. There are times in years where he just sits on cash and does nothing. And there are other times he's a full allocator and deployer into the ecosystem. We're trying to do this for the Bitcoin denominated ecosystem on the Bitcoin standard.
Now, a number of your peers have obviously looking to literally stop growing in the Bitcoin mining side and focus their megawatts towards HPC. Now, American Bitcoin, obviously, as the mining element of Hut 8. Does that provide some opportunities maybe going forward with companies starting to pivot? And how do you see, I mean, I sat through 15, maybe 16 minor presentations at the HC Wainwright, and we unfortunately we couldn't listen to ABTC because of some regulatory issues at the time there, but there was a sense from a number of miners that the halving coming up is going to be a real challenging position, especially where you think these last few quarters, even though we've seen the Bitcoin price rise, and today we were looking at the global hash rate from a 7-day position, now well over 1,000 exahash. Meaning difficulty is going to be a problem as well as a halving. Where do you see sort of like the Bitcoin mining industry over this next 3 years, and what opportunities will it present or may present to a company like American Bitcoin?
The biggest thing about mining is understanding your marginal cost of production and what hash price is, right? Your difficulty and your Bitcoin price really don't matter as much. Those are drivers into the number that really matters, which is hash price. And if the hash price is good and people are making a lot of money, then more people will come on to make money as well, right? It's very much like oil and gas and any kind of commodity business. I think what allows American Bitcoin to be really successful compared to mining companies, traditional mining companies, is we really thought about, why do a lot of mining companies not succeed when they deploy capital? I'll start with one. You have massive SG&A overhead and executive compensation. So you have a big hurdle to achieve before you can become profitable. Number two, you have costs that you're spending outside just buying the ASIC into the infrastructure, the land, the substation, the power data center, the building. All of those investments are a much lower returning investment than buying the asset that generates Bitcoin itself. But you have to do that, because if you don't, then someone's going to charge you an arm and a leg in these old hosting asset light models that haven't worked, right? And Gryphon was one of those. The third, we have hundreds of employees, from on-site technicians to construction workers to design, engineering, data science, energy management, that run these facilities at scale. So you have a large fixed overhead as well. And then lastly, when you buy a machine historically, let's say with Bitmain, MicroBT, Proton, whoever, you make a decision like 9 months before the data center comes online. And you say, what's hash price today? What do we think it's going to be in 9 months? And then we deploy the capital, put down a deposit. And in 9 months, you're either right or you're wrong, but you're stuck with that investment. And so what did we do here that's different? American Bitcoin has not a lot of employees, right? Matt is one of the few single-digit employees that American Bitcoin has. Instead, it has a shared services agreement with HODL 8. It is able to leverage the fixed costs that HODL 8 has, and it's able to ebb and flow into it as a variable cost. So how amazing is it when you can utilize a resource, pay them pro rata, and be like, all right, you can go back now, instead of having that fixed overhead and cost. It's good for HUD-8 because it helps offset our SG&A, and it's good for American Bitcoin because in a time where the market is more bearish, you just need to hibernate and relax, and you can really drive down those costs really quickly, right? So that's the first. The second is HUD-8 is long megawatts. We want to own megawatts for the long term. And instead of saying, you know what, we're going to charge American Bitcoin a lot of money because it's a volatile counterparty with Bitcoin and volatility, et cetera, we say we want to own these megawatts no matter what. So why don't we just do a fair yield on cost? And then by the time we develop these sites for American Bitcoin and other opportunities, like it's all good because we want to own as many megawatts as possible and own that footprint. That's good for American Bitcoin because now it doesn't have to spend money on the substation, on the piece of land, on the building. It can spend all of its money on the asset that actually drives the Bitcoin return, meanwhile maintaining vertically integrated economics. It controls its own energy costs. It controls curtailment. It doesn't have any of those issues when you have to trust a third party. And then in terms of how we buy machines, what was also innovative in Vega outside of the actual data center, the infrastructure, the technology, was how we stepped from 10 to 25 exahash. Bitmain was actually the customer of Vega that we built the facility for. They signed a multi-year agreement where they were the customer and they were the hosting client. And we said, we have the right to buy these machines at a fixed price that was pre-negotiated, right? So if Bitcoin prices went up a lot, they couldn't renegotiate with us. And when we give you the money, you have to give us the hash rate immediately. And so now instead of waiting 9 months, we can say, where's hash price today? What does the return profile look like? And as soon as I make the investment, we're making a return on that investment immediately rather than having cash out the door. And so these specific things are really important on what stands out for American Bitcoin and what, in our opinion, allows it to actually fulfill on the promise that Bitcoin mining had to investors to be able to have these businesses that you invest in that give you a levered return on Bitcoin. And when Bitcoin mining is and machine prices are too high relative to hash price, we're not going to invest. We're just going to hold and mine the machines we already have. And when capital markets are really cheap, we'll raise money to buy Bitcoin. When it's not, we won't. And so I think that's really important because the promise of what Bitcoin mining companies could be, the promise of what these treasuries companies could be, it all comes down, in my opinion, to execution and how do you actually execute on those promises and deliver the results that people want.
Yeah. You took part in the one of the keynote panels at the conference, but on the first day, the keynote speaker was Michael Saylor, who was effectively really the first one to start the big Treasury Management company. And we've seen an influx of Treasury Management companies, especially in the last 6 months. What sort of sets aside American Bitcoin to the other Treasury Management companies that are out there?
Yeah. Look, Michael Saylor, I'll let you chime in real quick, Matt, just on Saylor quickly.
Sure.
Michael Saylor is a dear friend. He's the mentor. I was actually talking to him at the conference. I was like, hey, when you were pushing me and a bunch of other companies to do treasury strategies last year, could you have imagined what happened this year? Right? Is that really what you had intended and in mind? But I think what we have is unique and different. I'll let Matt chime in there first, but I do want to give Michael Saylor a lot of credit for where we are today. He really pushed us to think about the value of monetizing our volatility. And he really wanted HUD-8 to turn into American Bitcoin really at the time and say, go monetize your volatility. And I think we ended up getting the best of both worlds. But ourselves, Eric Trump is obviously very close with Michael Saylor as well. We both give him a lot of credit for getting this ball rolling. And we hope to deliver to our shareholders what he did for his shareholders over the last 5 years, being one of the most appreciating stocks in the markets over the last 5 years. Matt, why don't you jump in and tell them how?
Yeah, no, I first fully agree with Asher. I think it takes immense talent to effectively create a new category of industry. So big kudos to Saylor for what he's done, and he's been a supporter of ours as well. You know, when Asher and I were at USC, there was a professor, Warren Bennis, a leadership professor, and he had a great line he used to say, which is managers do things right and leaders do the right thing. And so we historically had been in mining. We'd been excellent managers, right? Our best in class sites, low cost of energy, operational discipline. We were excellent managers, right? Now in Bitcoin
And I do
accumulation,
want to clarify when he says we, it was US Bitcoin Corp, then HODL post us merging, because obviously they didn't have the best operations pre us merging. So I don't want people to mistake.
we all yeah, let us give credit to ourselves. Or the US Bitcoin team through the ages and stages had a history and a track record of doing things right. So when the time came to create a Bitcoin accumulator, it was an opportunity, we believe, to do the right thing, which is create a pure play that combines the exahash, right, that we already had the skills with now the digital asset treasury concept and models that Saylor had perfected. So Saylor had come from this side of the Venn diagram. We had come from this side of the Venn diagram. If anything, this was a three-circle one because you obviously had the Trump brothers with their side of the Venn diagram. But collectively at that nexus, there was a huge opportunity to build a leader and to build a real player in the category, right? Bringing out the best of all three of those different spheres, right? So for us, I think it's tremendously exciting. We are differentiated. We have a way to sort of blend down our Bitcoin price. Buying spot is the most straightforward way to accumulate Bitcoin, but we uniquely have also, compared to some of our peers on the treasury side, we have the mining operation. So we're really thoughtful about the different levers we can pull to maximize value for the shareholders in the form of Bitcoin.
Have you had to bring in more expertise around treasury management? It's not something that every company automatically has that sort of experience, especially when we're talking about Bitcoin treasury management. Or did you feel you had sufficient expertise already in the company?
We have good folks behind the scenes that help support the strategy, et cetera. Michael Ho is a wizard at capital markets. That is really where he thrives. If we think about a lot of the right moves we made, the right financings, I mean, he as a single person, I think, contributed as much EBITDA as the hundreds of people we have in the company. He tells me this all the time, gives me shit for it all the time, right? Through the trades that he made with our Bitcoin balance sheet. But he is a financial savant. And I think the mix between him on the treasury side, myself on the mining side, Matt Prusak on the ecosystem side, we truly have one of the most world-class management teams to execute on Eric and Donald Trump's vision of being a leading Bitcoin exposure company for the average American to be able to own and have exposure to Bitcoin.
Yeah. One more question before I hand back over to Bryce. Actually, you'll remember this about a year ago. You asked us to judge you in the third quarter on your performance as a CEO, give you a chance to embed those strategies that you were putting into place. In terms of Matt and Michael, the CEO and the president of the company, when should we be looking to sort of like take a look at what they bring to the company in terms of results orientated? When should we give them a mark in the future? How long would you give them?
Yeah, look, I think the next couple months are really, really important in building the foundation for the business and then seeing that continue to accelerate or grow. So I think one nice checkpoint is kind of end of this year, beginning of next year, and then another checkpoint kind of mid next year. How did we do on
Suffice to say that the
Yeah.
share price is exactly what you said. I mean, come quarter three, the Hut 8 share price started to explode. Everything started to come in. All those efficiency measures that you brought in, we won't spend time on this podcast talking about them, but they were sort of like interesting to listen to at the time. And I was even speaking to a number of the employees how they were being implemented. But no, you scored a good grade A on your school report for them for that first 9 months, and hopefully we'll see Matt and Michael do exactly the same with American Bitcoin.
These guys will. We have no doubt in what the team is capable of. And look, we're in a great market condition today. America is leading in cryptocurrency, and American Bitcoin will lead as the premier Bitcoin exposure company for shareholders.
Yeah, that's great. I'd give you an A plus, Asher. Excellent work. Keep it up. And it's just incredible what you guys have been able to build here with ABTC in such short order. We look forward to continued updates following this company's growth. Matt, thank you so much for taking the time, coming on the channel. Pleasure getting to know you. Asher, you're always welcome, and great work there. Keep it up.
Great to see you guys. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having us.